It's an honor and privilege to train with you today, our Doctors of Chiropractic on Pro Webinar. Now it's time to get focused and challenge yourself to reach your full potential. Here's the president and founder of the Accelerate Nation, your coach, Dr. C.J. Mertz.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to the September Pro Webinar. Today, our $100,000 lesson plan is entitled simply, Why We Serve. In just the last few minutes, what you had scrolling past your screen were the 33 principles of chiropractic. And I want you to know that that is what we're going to study in part today. I believe today your head and heart will be shifted forever. I believe the message I have for you today is so powerful and it is so timeless that it is something that you're going to want to incorporate into your workshop, into your dinner talk, into your TIC, into your team meetings, into virtually everything that you say and do. That is how big this message is today, why we serve. We are right in the middle of the theme of philosophy. And of course, we just came off an earth-shattering power huddle of last week, setting the stage for this message today. I also want you to know that Jamie has put those 33 principles in the Print It section. So when you're done here, go to the Print It section. And my suggestion is have your team take it nicely printed and frame it and put it up somewhere so that your patients can see on a regular basis that that which you do in your practice is really grounded in these principles. And it gives you so much more clout and credibility. Even if your patients really don't know what all of those principles mean, that's not as important as that you are abiding by universal success principles of healing and repair, and that they can build their own hope and trust and confidence in that. I'm also going to suggest to you that over time, you are teaching them, not necessarily 33 principles, but even today, I'm going to take a handful of them inside this training as a way to show you not only how to transform yourself and your CAs through this message, how you may be able to take this and transfer it to your patients. Friends, there is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Victor Hugo was the first to say these words, and I bet you've heard that before, haven't you? I bet you've heard that, and it wasn't necessarily connected to chiropractic because it's such a big idea. And the idea is on idea, right? There's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Friends, I want you to know we are right smack in the middle of one of the biggest ideas that has ever hit planet Earth. And when I say that, I don't want you to think small. I want you to think of that when man discovered fire, right? When man discovered the wheel, right? When man discovered electricity, and when man discovered above, down, inside, I want you to literally think for a moment, just for a moment, that big. And so when I say that there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come, taking the very words from Victor Hugo, we are applying that right into our lane. We are applying that not just to our profession, we're applying that right now to you and your practice and this moment in time. I want you to see coming up on your screen is a picture of Reverend Samuel Weed. And Reverend Weed has a forever connection to chiropractic. He is indelibly part of our profession forever. And the reason why, it turns out that in Old Dad Chiro, you can read that there was a family that went to a world fair. And it turns out the daughter winds up having this terrible injury, and she winds up going to the doctor. She goes to multiple doctors, and she gets the same exact response from the doctors. And of course, that is that her ankle and her leg have been injured so badly that the first doctor says, let's amputate the ankle so that it doesn't actually create any gangrene or further injure any other part of her leg. Can you imagine back at this time? This is, before 1895. just before 1895. And we're talking about like how this has all come to pass. And now he goes to a second doctor. Now, you know, back in that day when somebody actually went to a doctor in a long white jacket and they said, here, this is what we're going to do. That's what people did. But somehow Reverend Weed, by the grace of God, just said, you know, I'm going to get a second opinion. He might have been one of the few people at that time that ever did that. He might have even coined that phrase, second opinion. That's how big this moment is. The second doctor, though, looked at his daughter and said the same thing. And then another one said the same thing. And then someone he knew, maybe in his congregation, a friend just said, hey, you know what? You need to go see this person. Remember, we don't even know what we're called yet. We don't even have a name yet. He just said there's this man in this infirmary who's producing miracles, and maybe you should bring your daughter there. They literally have to carry her in. The text says that this girl, Reverend Weed's daughter, her ankle was dangling at the bottom of her leg. Just kind of get a sense of how bad this injury is and what the doctors had already recommended, not one, not two. And then the text actually reads that, of course, Reverend Weed winds up actually seeing Dee Dee Palmer. Dee Dee Palmer evaluates this little girl. And the text says 3 weeks later, right? She is walking unassisted without any cane, anything at all. She's healed and improving, and she's back into her healthy, normal life. Well, I want you to know that certainly Reverend Weed had an intervention with his wife and the illnesses that she had. I believe it was tuberculosis at that time. Reverend Weed had his own issues, and he came in to see Dee Dee Palmer. I mean, it was an entire family experience, and there was just one healing revelation, you know, after another. And of course, you could imagine, even though Reverend Weed is paying for these services, there was no way that money could have possibly accounted for what Dee Dee had done for him and his wife and his daughter and his family. And so Reverend Weed comes to Dee Dee Palmer one day, already having asked him, so what is it that you call this? Like, what are you doing? And Dee Dee has simply said, well, I'm not really sure. It's just by hand, right? And you've heard that before. Reverend Weed was so overtaken by what this experience had done for him and his family. He went back, and for a few weeks, he went back into his Greek, he went back into Hebrew, and he started to study words that were by hand and associated other words, and he was trying to come up with, what could we call this thing? Because Dee Dee Palmer didn't even have anything to call it. Can you imagine? This is what's happening in that moment. And he comes back to Dee Dee and says, you know, I've discovered 3 words, you know, chiropraxy, chiropraxis, and chiropractic. And this is what they mean. And it may just be that maybe one of these, you could use it. You know, like, this is my gift to you, right? Like, you could use this, and maybe you could call it that. What do you think? I, today, am still absolutely amazed that our profession was coined by a patient, by somebody that had the healing experience that you do every day with your patients. And that, just imagine one of your patients coming up to you and saying, you know what, I've actually been studying this because what you've done for my daughter, what you've done for my spouse, what you've done for me is just overwhelming. I could never repay you. And I've just, you know, I'm a scholar. And so I went back into different texts, you know, and different languages to see, you know, could we actually coin this? And here's what I've come up with. That's what happened. And of course, this isn't a test. You already know what Dee Dee chose, chiropractic. And maybe, just maybe, you know, there's a CA or an associate or somebody listening that maybe didn't go to a chiropractic college that actually ever taught this, right? And so maybe I'm coming and taking some history right now back into this presentation. But this is huge for us to get, that our philosophy leads us all the way back to a patient and a family who had an amazing experience in getting well and staying well from above down, inside out. This is that idea that was so powerful. And the question then that comes is, well, how powerful is this idea? Right? How powerful really is this idea? I mean, after all, it was great for Reverend Weed and his family. And we know that Dee Dee did hundreds and hundreds of these services, for patients. We didn't even know to call it an adjustment. We didn't have the word vertebral subluxation. We certainly didn't have the word chiropractic. And so other ways of communicating it were still sort of just being in the discovery process. I mean, that's how unbelievable this narrative is, this story, which now is something you live and breathe, and it's your work, right? And this is your calling, this is your profession. But this was just an idea that was in formulation based upon very solid facts, and then based on very solid principle. What are we talking about? People that had failed conventional medicine were winding up in the infirmary in Davenport, Iowa. People that actually had taken boats and trains, traveled all across the country because they heard about, and they didn't know what to call it. This man is doing something over here. You should go check it out. In fact, Mayo Clinic, referring people that were diagnosed as terminal, would actually go to this infirmary. And they'd wind up realizing that many weeks later, they'd actually hear that the man that surely, or woman surely that should have died, or would have normally, typically this is what happened if we followed what we do here, they're well. This is how we started. How powerful is this idea? Well, think about this. The human genome has not changed 1% in 10,000 years. We hear so much about, blood type and, various ways that people, should be eating based on their blood type. We hear about like these, gene mutations, and we learn about people that are actually studying their own genes to determine, sort of what's going on with their own health. And there's all kinds of things happening today about changes that have been going on, or some seemingly apparent changes. And yet, the human genome has not changed 1% in 10,000 years. Furthermore, the human spine has not changed 1% in 10,000 years. And so the way in which the facets were designed in the 24 movable vertebrae and the cervical and thoracic and lumbar and sacrum, not 1% in 10,000 years. And finally, the human nerve system has not changed 1% in the last 10,000 years. The way in which it takes the innate forces through the nerve system to every single cell, tissue, and organ in the body hasn't changed 1% in 10,000 years. And I want to just start there. For us to take a nice big breath in and just blow it out, and just realize, while there's pandemonium all around you, and there's just DEFCON 3, and it's just triage all around you, and there's fear, and there's sickness, and there's all kinds of people's ideas and thoughts and opinions, and sort of new research has just said and come out with, except for the fact that the human genome, the spine, and the nerve system haven't changed 1% in 10,000 years. That should give you even a runway right now, a massive runway for you to launch something larger than you could have ever imagined in your entire life. Remember, D.D. Palmer didn't open a practice like you and I did. He started a profession. Now, it may very well have been that when he started serving people, maybe in the moment he didn't realize, wow, everyone on the planet needs this, and I need more people like me. Like, I can't be the only one. And certainly he shared that with his son, BJ. And if I had more time, we'd spend 5 hours just talking about BJ, the true developer. The founder of chiropractic is Didi, the true developer is BJ. But so we had two chiropractors, in 1895, the turn of the century, 1901, 1902, 1905. There's two chiropractors on planet Earth. And it was then that they realized, actually, we didn't create a practice. We didn't just create an office here in Davenport, Iowa, for people to come and get cared for in this way. We just created the laboratory to prove the model for a brand new profession that is being birthed on planet Earth, one that has been desperately needed for hundreds and hundreds of years, has now come to pass. And it's going to take generations for it to really create its fullness, right? It's not going to actually get to where it needs to be overnight. And they knew all that. They knew way past their own lifetime, chiropractic would just be getting from the crawling to the walking. And at some point, walking to running, which by the way, is where we are right now. We're just walking. We got out of the crawl to the walk, and we're sort of like walk jog, right? And then the walk jog is going to lead us to whole new levels of amazing growth on planet Earth. And after you and I are gone and pass this torch, the walk will turn into a run. And then we'll see, chiropractic like cell phones, on planet Earth. And people will look back and go, how did anybody ever, live without getting under regular chiropractic? I mean, how barbaric would that have been? People actually were living without chiropractic care. That will be the case. I'm telling you right now, that will be the case. It won't be today or tomorrow, but it's coming. And it's actually the work that you and I do today that actually makes that a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's how big this idea is. And what else has not changed? Which would be my next question, is like, well, what else has not changed? I mean, the genome, the spine, the nerve system. What else has not changed is the nerve system controls all function, repair, healing, and metabolism in the body. So what the nerve system does, the function, the very purpose of the nerve system hasn't changed 1% in 10,000 years. And the reason why, of course, that is so important in this month of studying philosophy is that people in your town, they're sicker than ever. They're hurt, they're not sleeping, they're not eating well, they're not moving well, they're not thinking well. There's so much at stake here for them, for their spouse, for their children, for their coworkers, their neighbors, their relatives. And they still don't know the foundational truth of where all sickness comes from and where all health comes from. They still don't know that. And that's why this is so important today, because we're creating that runway that gives you a chance to launch into something, into your practice that you couldn't have imagined. I'm telling you right now, this message today, while it has seemingly nothing to do with practice building, right? It's just philosophy, right? This right here is jet fuel. And if you listen with your head and heart today, you can't put jet fuel into a car. You need to put it into a jet. And so what I'm talking about is actually looking at your practice and transforming. Even as you're looking at me and hearing me right now, you are no longer a driver of something that goes along the road. You're now a pilot that is now operating something that is about to launch. And how many people can we get on board, and how far can we go? I want to bring us now to principle 23. It was one of those 33 that scrolled by at the top. And the principle 23 reminds us that the function of innate intelligence is to adapt to universal forces and matter for use in the body, so that all parts of the body will have coordinated action for mutual benefit. Well, what does that mean? Number one, harmony. One of the phrases that Didi created from the very beginning was that what he was doing was helping a patient, a person, help themselves to reestablish normal tone. See, now today, you'd hear me use terms like optimal health. And that's a phrase that I helped coin, some 30 years ago, optimal health and well-being. But really, I just took that as a way to say normal tone. Isn't it interesting, though, that what God did for us was he made what's supposed to be normal, that's optimal. Like, in other words, what does the normal person, how should the normal person be functioning? And the answer is optimally, right? And so normal is optimal. That's what it should be. And maybe just now you're even starting to put those together, which seems somewhat paradoxical, right? I mean, like, you wouldn't think of normal as best, normal as highest bar. And yet that's what Didi did for our profession. That's what Didi did for every patient that walked in. Normal tone is your best you. That's your normal tone. And by having the nerve system functioning properly, it allows you to reestablish normal tone. Normal tone across every tissue, normal tone across every function in your body. Optimum health and well-being. Isn't that amazing? True harmony. There are 70 trillion cells in the human body, and the brain is connected to every single one of them. I wonder how often you say that. I wonder how often your CAs are saying that. You know, somebody checking out, somebody maybe on therapy after an adjustment, maybe during a biostructural exam, and you have a tech or an associate coming in, and just simply, you know, I know you've probably heard this before, Andy, but your brain is connected to every single one of the 70 trillion cells called you. Your brain is connected to every single one of those cells. That's why it's so important that we check you as often, as regularly as we do, so that we make sure that your brain is communicating properly to every one of those cells so that you can achieve and maintain optimal health and well-being. Let's check you, right? That becomes then something your patients should be able to say. It's something that they really recognize, that my brain is connected to 70 trillion cells, all of them, through a very complicated nerve system. It's the AT&T, right? The fiber optics of my body, my nerve system. It divides so many times that every single cell in my body has a nerve ending that's directly connected back to my brain. That in itself is an enormous idea, isn't it? Knowing that the nerve system is the same in every human being. So people have different blood supplies, you know, different sizes, different shapes. We'll be talking about that. But the truth is, isn't it interesting? Over 7 billion people on planet Earth, we all have the exact same nerve system, and we have the exact same innate force, the same, what we call the mental impulse or the electrical signal flowing over the nerve system is exactly the same in you as it is in me, as it is in everyone that you serve, everyone in your town, everyone on earth. That can't be a coincidence, right? That there's no way that could be a coincidence. And in fact, that is why it is required for chiropractic to become servicing planet Earth. See, because even though we have all these differences between human beings, the one thing that we all have in common, which is the exact same flow of nerve signals over our nerve system, just happens to actually control all the function, healing, repair, metabolism in our bodies. Wow. You know, sometimes we just get so caught up with just sort of what's going on with our business that we kind of maybe even just forget for a moment. That's why you are doing what you're doing. That's why we serve, right? I mean, that's why. Like, if that wasn't true, you and I wouldn't be here right now doing what we're doing. Number one. And number two, it wouldn't be one of those things where everyone in your town should be seeing you right now, right? That wouldn't be true either, because it would just be this person, or it would only work for people that have this sort of symptom, or people that just have this archetype. No, it's for everybody. And then it's way past your town, right? It's everyone on earth, for one simple, grand understanding that the nerve system controls all the function, all healing, all repair, all metabolism, and we all have the same nerve system and nerve signals. Incredible. So why is this so important to everyone on earth? Principle 29. So let's actually look at Principle 29 and realize something just so simple, right? Each statement that I'm making is a very simple statement, and yet it's earth-shattering, right? In fact, most of the most profound statements that you'll ever hear in your life are simple. It has been taken from such a complicated understanding, which this is, an extraordinarily complicated set of understandings, to a statement so simple that you could kind of digest it, breathe it, and pass it on to somebody else in a matter of a few seconds. Principle 29 is something we should be hearing from the four walls of your office on a regular basis. Here's what it says. There can be interference with the transmission of innate forces. That's it. In one phrase, nerve interference, right? The innate forces can be interfered with. So now we actually have a situation where we didn't know that. We just knew that the brain was communicating with nerve signals to all 70 trillion cells of the body, and that, you know, when that's happening, we have normal tone, right? We're optimal. But then principle, do you notice that there's only 33 principles? It takes all the way to principle 29 before we actually hear, oh, by the way, the transmission of innate forces, which only flow over the nerve system, can be interfered. Well, now that sounds important, because we just said that all, right, that includes everything, right? All function, all healing, all repair, all metabolism. That's what we just heard. That's a principle. It's a governing principle. That's all found in those innate forces. That's found in those innate forces. And those innate forces can be interfered, principle 29. This is from the University of Colorado Department of Biomechanics. Some of you may have heard of him, PhD Chung-Ha Su. And what he said was 2.2 grams, which is essentially the weight of a dime, is enough pressure to interfere nerve flow by 40 to 60%. So now we see here just a sliver of science that comes alongside these principles and says, well, science just continues to prove the philosophy and the principles of chiropractic, and has been since the 20th century and on into the 21st century. We just continue further and further and further proving, clarifying, confirming each and every principle that we are governed by. Pretty amazing, isn't it? And so this interference then is everything. Now, how does this play out? Well, let's go to principle 30. And see, I believe these were written in an order, and it just gives me goosebumps even saying this to you. And in fact, I'm just privileged. I got to tell you, I'm honored and privileged to be teaching this to you today. The fact that I have the chance to share this message with you truly is one of the greatest, really one of the greatest opportunities in my life. It is something that I take with great respect and honor. And I want you to know that this never gets old to me. It never has. In fact, it just gets bigger every time that I bring it up, which is what I want to kind of inspire in you today, right? Is like, well, how often is this part of a training? How often is this really part of your dinner talk? How often is this in a lunch and learn or a workshop? Or have you just gotten just so rote in what you're doing that really the bigness of this has maybe fallen just a bit? Well, that's what we're doing, right? We're just blowing off any of the dust, and kind of licking our wounds, and we're getting right back to why we serve and why we need to do it in a mighty big, big way. So principle 30 says this: interference with the transmission of innate forces causes incoordination, or a word that now is phrased by Didi and our forefathers, dis-ease. Previously, there was only a word known as disease, and that's, of course, the one that everyone talks about today, disease, but that is not what that says. It says dis-ease. Didi used to talk about a lack of ease, and that lack of ease is what actually created a shift in tone. Remember we talked about normal tone? Well, then if there's normal tone, there's abnormal tone, right? And so many of the people that he would be working with, his understanding was, well, this is abnormal tone, so we need to do something which then allows your body, it's not something I'm doing, it's something that your body is doing, is then manifesting and reestablishing normal tone. Well, how does that happen? Well, there's interference. And so by actually removing interference allows then that pathway of normal signals flowing from the brain to 70 trillion cells in your body. Principle 30 lets us know that 29 said there can be interference. Okay, well that sounds important, but that's not earth-shattering yet until you get to principle 30. Yeah, that interference in the nerve system leads to incoordination and dis-ease in the body. Do you understand that when this is said, it's referring to any or all systems or tissue? So it wasn't just sort of, well, that will cause headaches. You know how often chiropractic is just put like into a little bottle, like, chiropractors, oh yeah, they're good for low back pain, aren't they? Like all of a sudden, really? The entire profession, really? Headaches, really? Principle 30. Interference leads to incoordination of the human being, dis-ease of the human body and any or all of its systems. 30 is earth-shattering. And that's something that we need to ground our team in, right? Because when every patient walks in our door, some of them are having a hard time getting pregnant. Some of them are having a hard time just going to sleep. Some are having a hard time digesting. Some of them are having a hard time moving. Some of them have pain. Some of them have weakness. And it goes on and on. Some have multiple things going on, irritable bowel, and, right? Multiple diagnoses. And sometimes it gets confusing until you actually get grounded again. You go, no, this isn't confusing. This isn't confusing at all. I understand at the heart of it, this is what is happening. BJ said, whenever there's interference with transmission of nerve signals, it always leads to too much or too little force in the actual cell, right? There's too much or too little power, if you will, that's flowing sort of over the nerve system, as if to say, like, that interference now is being given some type of quantitative evaluation, like, okay, so now if the nerve system has been interfered, what does that really mean? Well, it means that the nerve system's carrying either to, at least to these cells, at least to these tissues, it's carrying not enough information, or it's carrying too much information. And of course, from Principle 30, we know that causes an incoordination. It causes a disease. And then BJ added to that, yeah, it's too much or too little. Now think about this. This comes from Fritz Albert Popp, leading biophysicist of the 20th century. And I have put him in many of the teachings that I do here in the Accelerate Coaching Program. This is just an excerpt from research from Fritz Albert Popp. And he says, multiple sclerosis patients' cells appear to absorb too much light, while cancer patients' cells appear unable to absorb enough light relative to healthy cells and normal light emissions. And of course, this was his research, right, was studying how cells then take what would be considered light that's equivalent to what is the energy flowing over the nerve system. And that when he was using the light emission research through multiple sclerosis patients, they absorbed too much light. It was almost as if there wasn't the back door that was allowing it to come in, have its normal flow through the cell, and then release from the cell. It was trapped, and there was too much light staying in the cell, where he talked about the cancer cell and the cancer patient with their cells. It's almost like it's Swiss cheese. It's like the light's going in and it's leaving so quickly. It didn't give a chance to seed. It didn't have a chance to do what it was supposed to do, that intelligence in the cell. Isn't that amazing that this is a biophysicist who's not even talking about how to solve this? He has no idea how we solve it. He's just saying, this is how it's being caused. This is a direct correlation between these incoordinations or dis-eases in the body, and we're noting at a cellular level what's happening when innate forces, when innate intelligence, those flow, that intelligence flowing over the nerve system isn't flowing through the cell properly. Friends, this should just get goosebumps all over you, because see, any patient that walks into your office in pain, stiff, out of alignment, right, with any one of various functions or dysfunctions occurring, has light emission issues through some or more parts of their body. And by what you do, you are helping the patient. You're helping the patient reestablish normal tone in one or more areas of the body. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's not going to happen in one adjustment or two. And sometimes we hear of those stories, and I'm not suggesting that can't or didn't happen. I'm suggesting that in most cases, the alignment process takes time. That's the sixth principle, right, of our 33. All healing processes take time. And that's why we recommend having at least 6 months, if not 12 months of corrective care time to be able to do the work that we do that creates the alignment, that removes the nerve interference that allows the brain to communicate to the tissue and the tissue back to the brain in normal tone. Amazing. Well, here's principle 31. And I don't want you to think that the rest of this is just simply about principles themselves. I just wanted you to get today how relevant they are. You know, there's no way in 2019 I'd be talking about these things if they weren't relevant. Amen? I mean, I'm not just suggesting that I'm saying these things historically, like, hey, you know what, this is a part of our history, and I thought I'd just come in as sort of your history teacher today, give you a little bit of information about what we used to think about chiropractic. This is the foundation of all mega practices on planet Earth today. And the question really is, how much of this has been threaded and woven into the fabric and foundation of your practice, your team, your patients. See, new patients, referrals, PVA, retention, revenue, all of those things are lifted off of this. That's why this is so unbelievably important. Principle 31 says, interference with transmission in the body is always directly or indirectly due to vertebral subluxation in the spinal column. 31 principles later, do we hear the word vertebral subluxation? Notice that we haven't been talking about the spine at all. We've been talking about intelligence. And then we're talking about the nerve system. We're talking about the intelligence having to transform itself, which we're going to get into here in a mighty way, because intelligence has to transform itself in order to transmit. And so here we have principles talking about transmission, transmission, transmission. Did you notice that's the one word that we keep saying over again? Yeah, so the transmission of innate forces can be interfered with. The transmission of innate forces then, when this occurs, creates incoordination, it creates dis-ease. The transmission, then we find out in principle 31, is always directly or indirectly due, the interference of the transmission, to vertebral subluxation, first time in all the principles, in the spinal column. But what do you do for a living? And the answer is that you're changing a generation of people through the way they think about their healthcare paradigm for themselves, their family, and friends forever. That's what you do for a living. It just so happens you use your hands and maybe a few other instruments to support what you do with your hands, which is exactly what D.D. Palmer did from the very beginning. And he took a big idea in his hands and helped hundreds of people a day free themselves of the fear, free themselves of the interference, and reestablish normal tone so they could actually live a life, an optimum, healthy, well life, them and their families. This is what chiropractic was built on. I think it's amazing. And nowhere in there are we talking about headaches and back pain. It's so much bigger than that. And so we see now that the further science advances, the more stunningly accurate the chiropractic principles and the more important they are to the well-being of all human life. Now, anywhere you look, you can actually find some science and some article that would say, chiropractic was born out of a Cracker Jack box. And you can hear people's opinions and you can hear this or that. But the large fire hose of science that has been published in the last 40 years is nothing but just saying, wow, those principles that were laid down that many years ago are spot on. And we just continue to see the correlation and the absolute seamlessness of what it is that chiropractic was built upon and what they're saying they do for the body and how the body responds from above down, inside out. Incredible, right? So this should be giving you even a greater sense of, maybe I need to be more bold. Maybe I've just been really under the radar, kind of just talking about and helping patients, and as they come in, I'm helping them, but I'm not really talking boldly. I'm not moving boldly. I'm not acting boldly. I'm not planning boldly. And I'm hoping and praying that is what's coming out of this message, because guess what? Over the next year, 2 years, 5 years, and 10 years, the genome of human beings will not have changed 1%. Neither their spines or their nerve systems or the plight, which is that interference will come. And we're going to learn here in just a minute why and how that happens. See, medical science has led the world to think health is driven by chemistry. And so I want to debunk that today, and I want to help you and your team really get something new out of this. We call this in the Accelerate program the medicine pump theory. Let's take a look at this. The medicine pump theory then is one that starts with an examination, and that examination and the purpose of it is to create a diagnosis. Understand that in the conventional way and medical way of thinking, the only way we can start any care at all is through a diagnosis. So something has to be coined. We have to call it something. So the purpose of the exam is to call it something, and that is the diagnosis. Now, notice that when there's the diagnosis, we can then prescribe. Now, notice how those two have come together, that now once we can call it something, we can chemical it. How did that happen? How did we get to the point where somebody's hurting, somebody's in pain, somebody's inflamed, various things are happening in the body, and we call it something, and then we chemical it? Like, how did that happen? Well, see, that's the medicine pump theory. And of course, pharma now owns that, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, as we know, worldwide. And so the world got bought into, like the flat earth, theory was that, well, isn't that the way it goes, right? And so if you're sick, you need chemistry, you need a medication to fix it. And so that is what has been the predominant thought on planet Earth. And that is being replaced every single day by our big idea. Do you get, that's how big our idea is. Our idea dwarfs pharma. As big as pharma is and as little as we are, our idea dwarfs it. So the medicine pump theory basically says, so somebody's lacking medicine, which is now what is going to be needed to help this person that is sick. So now what do? It's called the law of addition and subtraction. Simply says that we're going to add, right? So if somebody's sick, you add. What do? You add drugs. All right, so then what if that doesn't help? Well, then you add some more drugs. Maybe even a stronger dose of what they just recently, maybe you add now even further drugs. These are like experimental drugs, which have horrible side effects. And we're going to keep adding until we can't add anymore. That's all the drugs that we can put in you. And if the body part still hasn't responded, the law of addition goes to the law of subtraction. Meaning we just subtract the part. We just take the gallbladder out. We just take the tonsils out. We just put in the blank, fill in the blank. The law of addition is chemistry until that's not working. And then we go to the law of subtraction, which is cut it out. And then we will have said afterwards, and that was a successful case. And the surgery was successful, and so forth and so on. And so we just continue to reproduce the law of addition and subtraction. It's the medicine pump theory. The law of addition and subtraction, if the drug doesn't work, prescribe a stronger drug, right? If the body part still doesn't respond, remove the body part. I just want you to understand that this is how it's working in your town. So I don't want you to be thinking that this is something on this webinar, and this seminar that I'm teaching, like somehow I'm referring to something that's happening within my sphere, but not in yours. This is happening in every town across America and around the world. And then BJ writes this. Take a look at this amazing, amazing diagram. Spiritual, electrical, chemical, mechanical. So the body, and we are human beings, right? We're beings having a human experience. And so the spiritual then is that which is innate intelligence turning itself into an electrical signal. That's the second thing you see, because the brain, where innate intelligence then, let's say, is grounded, cannot travel without transforming, and these are the two words I want you to get. Innate intelligence transforms itself into an electrical signal. And that is what is traveling, millions of them per minute, to every cell and tissue in our body, right? Through the nerve system. So the innate intelligence cannot be injured or destroyed, transforms itself into now a mental impulse, an electrical signal, so it can travel. Do you understand? Now it's in a state that it can travel across the nerve. But when it transforms, it's now vulnerable. It could not be injured or destroyed as innate intelligence. That is a fundamental part of our principle. But as soon as it transforms to an electrical signal, now it can be injured. It's vulnerable. That should get the hair on the back of your neck up, recognizing that's the plight of humanity. That's every human being. No one's not in that conversation. And notice that then electrical signals then create chemicals in the body to produce mechanical actions, spiritual, electrical, chemical, mechanical. And how is it then that when somebody's sick, the world immediately goes to chemical? Because understand that chemistry is stupid. Chemistry needs an electrical signal for it to be produced. How is it that everyone's having chemical issues, and that's why we're putting drugs in? Do you understand that that does not fit at all once you understand this principle And this understanding, you say, oh my gosh, this law right here tells us there's no way you'd start with medicine first, because you'd have to see, is there something electrical that may have actually been interfered with that's now causing poor chemical? Let me be clear on this. Chiropractors have never said that medical doctors are wrong if they happen to do blood tests, for example, and they find out that people's chemistries are out of balance. The chiropractor isn't sort of denying, going, no, that's not true. And they're the first one going, no, you are true. Whether I would have taken that blood test or not, I would have imagined that these would have been off for sure, but we're not actually addressing chemical imbalances with chemistry. The chemical imbalances are because of an electrical interference. Come on, say yes if you get this, right? And so the chiropractor is going, oh yeah, there's definitely chemical imbalances. So we're gonna go up here and take a look at the circuit breaker box, make sure the power is, thank you, on. And now the power is on, flowing, creating, reestablishing normal tone. Well, what is normal tone? That's actually creating normal chemistry. Well, what is normal chemistry? It creates normal mechanical action. Well, let's look at what is normal mechanical action. What is mechanical? Your eyes see, your ears hear, tongues taste, right? Your heart pumps, your lungs breathe, your stomach digests, your muscles move, your arteries and veins circulate blood, glands produce and secrete hormones, i.e. you function. This is optimal health and healing, normal tone. But see, interference to the nervous system can affect any and all of these, principle 29 and 30 and 31. And you go back and you go, wow, okay, there can be interference that are to the innate forces. Those interferences can create incoordination, dis-ease, i.e. the mechanical dysfunctions, and that they are always directly or indirectly due to vertebral subluxations in the spinal column. You getting this, right? Now think about this. It has been discovered a fetus can feel, see, hear, and dream prior to birth. This is right out of fetal psychology. And by the way, we didn't figure this out in 2018. Take a look at the date. We've known this for quite some time. I mean, literally, there's a human being just happens to be sitting there right in mom's tummy, and we recognized, wow, right on the other side as they're now breathing and in the world. It wasn't like all of a sudden these functions are happening. No, this is what was happening very early on. So while emotions don't transfer from the mother, right, to their child, her stress hormones can and do. Well, this brings up a whole nother discussion about why you would be taking care of pregnant moms and their babies while they're pregnant and then after pregnancy. Think about the 3 T's. The 3 T's: negative thoughts, toxins, and traumas. Negative thoughts, toxins, and traumas. Thoughts are things like worry, anxiety, doubt, fear, anger, depression. Do you know anyone that experiences those from time to time? I can't imagine that you wouldn't have filled in every person that you know, including me and your spouse and your friends, that probably have some worry or some anxiety about something, right, going on with your child, going on with something in your life, and from time to time you find yourself. And of course, if you've trained yourself right, you wind up realizing, gosh, I'm having anxiety, or I am feeling depressed, or and I'm gonna get myself out of it. So, and that's healthy, right? That's just normal and healthy, is to know, gosh, I'm in it. Just the fact that I know that I'm in it, I'm heading on the way out. But the fact that it happens is what we're talking about, right? That's one of the 3 T's. Toxins. What are the toxins? Stress hormones, which we just talked about, right? Transferring from the mom to the baby. Medications, which the whole world is on. Drugs, legal and otherwise. Food additives, sodas, energy drinks, alcohol, environmental pollutants. This could go on for hours adding into that. So we're talking about negative thoughts, toxins, and then look at traumas. Traumas that happen, slip and falls at home, at work, recreational, sports, auto, repetitive traumas, and a whole lot more. So when we talk about the 3 T's, negative thoughts, toxins, and traumas, we're talking about stress and all the ways that stress happen. And if you add all that together, who in the world isn't being affected by some level of stress every single day? A negative thought, some type of toxin, not eating properly, etc. in a day, traumas, repetitive, recreational, something at home, at work, every day. And many people have multiple levels of stress every single day. The thing about it is, you and I are not responsible for preventing stress. That's not ever been in our principles. It's never been on our purpose line that somehow we're going to prevent stress from happening. Praise God that we don't have that responsibility, right? Because that's just not possible. So we're not going to not have stress as we live our lives. And that's okay, because stress will accumulate in your body unless you release it. See, because it's the very stress, as we'll see here in just a moment, stress in all its forms attacks the nerve system first. See, stress would be like the nerve system can be interfered. Okay, well, that sounds important, but that really doesn't tell us, what are the ramifications of that? What are the consequences of that? It's just like, okay, so innate forces can be interfered with. The hammer didn't drop yet until you get to principle 30. And it is actually the very interference of those transmissions that leads to all body incoordination and dis-ease. Well, okay, now, oh my gosh, that's one of the biggest ideas, the biggest issues on planet Earth today. Principle 30. And then you see stress. Well, stress in all its forms, that seems important, right? It's negative thoughts, toxins, and traumas. That's sort of like principle 29 until the hammer drops in principle 30. And what's the hammer that just dropped? And that is, well, stress, which we can't avoid. Everyone has it every day. Attacks the nerve system first. Planet Earth doesn't know that yet until you start telling everyone you know and will meet. Now, why is that important? Well, what we just learned a few minutes ago is that the nerve system controls all function, healing, repair, metabolism. And stress attacks the nerve system first, and we can't avoid stress. So if we always have stress and the stress is accumulating and it's attacking my nerve system, then that's creating an interference with the innate forces from the brain that are carrying the very signals that my body needs to be well. And stress is now interfering with that. I need to do something about that, i.e., go get checked by a chiropractor, find out where the nerve interference has accumulated, remove it, and then find yourself in a regular lifestyle under chiropractic care so the stress never gets a chance to accumulate past a threshold ever again. So your body remains normal tone. Amen? That's the idea, is it's not just to get into normal tone and then you're back out of normal tone and then into normal tone and then you're back out of normal tone. So you're spending most of your life in abnormal tone, and then every once in a while, for a little while, I go see the chiropractor, and then I don't see the chiropractor for months or years, and then I go see him again, and then I'm good for a couple months, and then I don't see him or her for several months or years, where I'm living most of my life in abnormal tone. That's never been the path, ever, in the principles of chiropractic. Now, when you actually look at how chiropractors are leading care plans, that's another story for another time, and we'll get to that. But see, all of this is so congruent with who we are and how we actually teach the Accelerate system, right, for leading patients to incredibly healthy lives. There's a phrase that my good friend Dennis Nikito turned into a beautiful poster, and it says, "As the twig is bent, so grows the tree." And I bet every one of us has in our minds right now a picture of just a little tree, just a small young tree, and then there's like this little pole, right? This little stick that's right there connected to it, and we can get a sense of that pole is perfectly vertical, and the tree is tied right there, and so the trunk is right there, and so we get the sense that, okay, well then as the tree gets bigger, we'll put probably a bigger pole in, and then at some point that tree will be strong enough that the roots will be deep enough, probably don't even need that pole anymore because it's now good, it's there. But if we have a little tree and we don't really have the pole, well then now it can actually get into all kinds of different variations of normal, healthy, straight. And now it's bent and it's curved and it's curvy and maybe leaning, and now the root system can't be as strong. And you get that, right? And so as the twig is bent, so grows the tree is one of the most amazing messages that we can give to our parents, that they can actually see them for their own children. The greatest single thing they could do is have the earliest detection of subluxation, because stress attacks everyone, right? This isn't just like an adult thing. In fact, listen to this next phrase, and this is now my phrase: most adult health problems begin in childhood. This is just the summary of what everyone's been saying for 50 years, right? Most adult problems, they happen in childhood. As the twig was bent, nobody actually addressed it. So now we have some real issues multiplied on top of other issues, multiplied on top of other issues. And now we have an adult who comes into our office, because the average person is 32 years old before they see a chiropractor. That's horrible. And we're working hard to change that, right? And it is our very philosophy that helps us make that change, even in the last few statements that I have just given you today. I pray that this has been something that you've actually stopped and paused and talked with your team about, or that you're about to do that, because I wanted to make this as practical, not just as historically accurate and as philosophically sound. I want this to be as inspiring and motivating as possible, that you're now on a wide runway, and that we're not looking at just going from our current volume, up 10%. There's more people that need you than a goal of 10% improvement, and when you get the understanding of our laws and principles, you could set a goal of 10% increase, or 15 or 20% increase. Not that that isn't a good result. It's just like, really? 10 or 20%, there's just too many people who are hurting. Way too many people that are hurting and sick and need your help right now. How do you set your goals? How do you set your energy? How do you set your systems so that you could truly help all the people that want and need your help right now? The effects of stress accumulation within one's spine and nerve system produces vertebral subluxation and nerve interference. I wanted to make sure that it was right there on your screen, that it's just really clear that these stresses that we're talking about come in and produce vertebral subluxation and nerve interference. And this is the core right there. It is part of every dis-ease ever. And so if somebody comes in, I have irritable bowel. Somebody else says I come in and I have, fill in the blank. What I want us to know is, no matter what diagnosis maybe somebody else has given, I'm not talking about you. They're coming in with MRIs and blood tests, and they're saying, yes, and my doctor said I have this, this, and this, and this. Some of the things you maybe never heard before. It's like, really? Wow. They said you have this. Yes, and you found this, and so I have fibromyalgia, plus I have this. But don't get confused for a second. Every one of those diagnoses is connected to the fact that there is incoordination and dis-ease in the body, because somewhere in the spinal column, there is nerve interference. Now, there may be more issues in the body than nerve interference. I'm not saying nerve interference only, that we may need to address other things like how they're eating and how they're sleeping, and maybe even just the way that we're actually doing some very specific muscle movement and muscle work and so forth and so on. I'm not saying additional work may not be helpful. In fact, I'm certain that it would. What I'm saying is that the very core is the nerve interference. And without actually addressing that, there's no way this person could ever, no matter what you do with them, achieve normal tone. Vertebral subluxation impacts every man, woman, and child of every race, creed, and color on planet Earth today. So when you start getting lost in the weeds of, so let's see, does that person have insurance? And so is it HMO? Is it PPO? Is it a HSA? And before you know it, we're now actually focusing on, well, maybe we should try to get auto cases in here. We should try to get some more auto cases. And then we're all of a sudden, your mind gets shorter and shorter and shorter. And I'm not saying let's not have somebody who's been in an auto accident, which I had last year, and I praise God for my chiropractor that put me back together, having been hit at over 70 miles an hour into my driver's side. I'm so grateful that I'm alive today, truly. By the grace of God, I'm even here with you right now. And that from the hospital, my wife called my chiropractor, and we were able to get in and be able to be seen and continued in an intense way. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be seeing people that have been in an auto accident. What I'm saying is, I'm a lifetime chiropractic patient and have been since I was 10 years old. And I happen to have been in an auto accident and got into intense care. And now I'm back into my wellness program. I want you to understand something. When you get these principles, you're not stuck and limited at all anymore about, so are they actually on the list that we're on, in network, out of network? It's all crap. See, those are all ways to just keep you down, right? That's what keeps you bland. You're not bold, you're bland, right? Those are all the ways that we just kind of trickle growth. Well, I don't know anybody at all in this program that's interested in trickle growth. And I, for one, am not at all. So I'm looking to put you right out here on the tarmac. And I'm looking to actually turn you in from a driver to a pilot. And it all starts with, so do you know who you are? And do you know why you are? And do you know what you are? Now let's go serve. The art, science, and philosophy of chiropractic is the ops manual for healing for the entire planet. There isn't anyone with any sickness of any kind that wouldn't require and benefit from chiropractic right now. I'm not suggesting that they wouldn't be benefited from something else too. So I'm not discarding, right? I'm not eliminating any other care in this particular presentation. That's not what I'm doing. I'm stating a fact. Anyone that is breathing, living, dealing with stress, with nerve interference based on our principles requires an examination and requires your care. This is why we pledge an oath. This is why we train so hard, my friends. This is why we serve. Wow. As I'm adjusting and somebody's talking about, it's still stiff right here. You get it, right? The patient has actually taken their own health down to one little, it's just right there. And that's what they did for their whole health, is they put it under a finger, I'm pointing right there. Never, ever let anyone, including a patient, do that to chiropractic. You cannot ever do that. Chiropractic is the biggest idea on planet Earth. And when somebody's pointing to right here, that doesn't reduce chiropractic, number one. And number two, it doesn't reduce what their whole body needs. So sometimes people are actually getting you to think about, gosh, it's right here. And when I turn, it's right there. When I turn right there, and it's right. And all of a sudden, they're trying to reduce. That's okay. Because see, that's the educated intelligence in them trying to tell you, this is where I feel the pain. Where it's not like we're not listening. It's not that we're not establishing that. We get it, right? But we see the bigness of their whole body, bigger than perhaps they ever have seen it. And so we're actually, watch this, serving the whole body. We're not serving this. We're serving the whole body to allow it to come into its normal tone. And one of the things that the body will reestablish is that and this and many other things that this patient isn't even telling you about, the pre-ulcerous condition and so forth and so on. We are continually thinking the biggest for that patient while they continue to think the smallest for themselves. It is our job to teach them how to think big for themselves and not just small. And that is how we lead them to a life and a lifestyle of chiropractic and health and well-being, and so much more to be said about this. I'm so excited to see so many of you already registered for next month, the Total Skills Integration, October 11th and 12th. I'm going to apologize if you're not registered now. You may not actually be able to get in. I would contact Jamie at success@cjmerch.com just to see if there's even any more seats available, and probably not. And what is going to happen next month is nothing short of complete transformation for you and your team, for your practice. We're going to get ready to not only just finish the fourth quarter better than you've ever done, we're going to turn into the new year 2020 in a way of launching into a new year, not just a new year, 2020, a new decade for your practice, for your community's health and well-being like never before. Cannot wait to share that time with you. Until next time, and as always, practice with passion. Have a wonderful day. God bless.